Good evening, everyone. I am Jennifer Wilson. I'm the Naahilii Community Program Coordinator at the Museum of the Cherokee Indian. And today we have Our Voices, Our Identity, Afro-Indigenous artists discussing the intersectionalities of art, identity, and culture. And I will let them introduce themselves. And Mikailah, would you like to take it away?
Sure. So Tatalach, Inamanit was Telekayun my Kasayaputim Mikailah Thompson, Inwas, Kalauna Wat, Ka Talyat Zashlapwe Pa Ka Alexandria Pa. Na Iti was Diane Ellenwood, Ka Nakatsi was Chloe Halfmoon, Ka Naplachki was Delbert Ellenwood. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mikailah Thompson. I am from the Nimipu, or as colonizers called us, Nez Perce tribe from Lapwai, Idaho. I come from the family of Chloe Halfmoon and Delbert Ellenwood. My mom is Diane Ellenwood and my father's James Thompson. Been beading for a while now, so I decided to take it full time this last couple months. So it's led me to awesome opportunities, including this one by being in a room full of fellow, first of all, Afro-Indigenous artists. So that's amazing in itself. And I'm just really, really happy and thankful to be here.
Okay, sorry. Got it. Hi, I'm Adeline. This is my first time doing one of these things, obviously. Can you still hear me? Oh, okay. And I Escuro Apache. Kumia is in Southern California. That's from. I'm not quite sure where my grandma whole family side's from because she stayed in Southern California with my grandpa. Just been beading, and I'm here with all these beautiful people, and that's it.
Should I go? Wakwisa, everybody. Dwanapka, my name is Natalie Ball. I live in Chiloquin, Oregon, where I'm raising my two babies. I was raising three, but she's grown now. It's our ancestral territory as well. I'm Modoc and Klamath on my father's side, and on my mother's side, she comes from rural Arkansas, from a Black community, and they came to the Pacific Northwest through a diaspora that happened. Sorry, I got kids home and animals home. So I'm Black Indigenous. I'm Modoc and Klamath on my father's side. It's where I live now. I'm serving on my tribal council for the Klamath tribes as well. But I was born and raised in Portland, Oregon, in a historically Black neighborhood. But within that was really neat was a tribal community, a Native community. And a third of my tribal population from the Klamath tribes came to that community in Portland after our tribe was terminated. And that's how I came to be, and that's where my parents met. I'm just happy to be here. I'm happy to represent myself as an artist and my practice as a mama, as a matriarch, and bring forward Blackness and Black identity and what that looks like in Indian country, and what that can look like.
Yat Tla'a'schi'i Tla'a'schi'i Radmilla Cody and Shia Tla'a'schi'i Nishle Naahilii Bachelor of Diné Naahilii Dashanale Akuts Sannishle Ado Tizizi Hulieri Sidat Nasha Kubahia Henson Kon the Shik Johnny Kon Bekagish Liji Naahilii Dan Lego Kon Jonago Bill the Bill Hilhashnet though left the Bahia Henson Kohiaha. Ikiaha for having me. My name is Radmilla Cody. I am of the Red Okirchi clan, born for the African Americans. My maternal clans are of the African Americans, and this is how I identify myself as a woman from Navajo territory. And I am very honored to be here and share space and kinship with beautiful and fierce Black, Native, Afro-Indigenous relatives. So this is exciting. So yeah, for having me.
Of course. Sorry, I was having some technical issues there. So wonderful to meet all of you. I'm so glad you guys could join us tonight. Let's see. Once I'm going to go ahead and ask the first question, and that is, what does identity and culture mean to you as an individual?
Yeah, so for me, I feel like those are two different, very strong words. I think when it comes to identity, it's taken a while, just obviously being biracial and being from two such strong cultural backgrounds, kind of navigating into what identity means, and especially more importantly, what identity means to me. That's kind of my definition of it, to where we get to choose and decide who we want to be without the influence or even stereotypes of other people or society. So when it comes down to identity, I think it all definitely comes down to individuality and how we choose to express that and how we choose to walk in that. And now when we're talking about culture, that definitely includes community, that definitely includes language, it includes tradition in many aspects. Culture also is definitely a broad word, but I think it's something that really you choose to connect to, in what ways you choose to connect to it, in ways that maybe have been rooted through your ancestors in a sense, and kind of passing along some of those traditions that they kind of kept. So I think just within my work, without getting too far-fetched, I try to kind of blend and intertwine each of those. I think we're constantly in a learning process when it comes to our identities and comes to our cultures, and I think that alone is a beautiful thing, just the whole learning process. And so when it comes to my work, I try to blend what I can and kind of be open and honest about how I blend both my identity and how I'm still even learning, a lot of parts of my culture as well, in both aspects. I think when it comes to my Black side, there's so much more digging that we have to do nowadays, and we have things at our fingertips about diving deep into our ancestry and finding out where we come from, because we have to do that on our own. We don't have much of the resources that we may have for our Native side, for our Black side. So I've kind of been within kind of taking that journey and finding ways to tap into who I am at the roots on both sides, and kind of creating a narrative from that on my own terms, which eventually all becomes of who I choose to be within my identity. So those are kind of how I feel individually. And I think with everything that I do it in an individual view. I always say, James Baldwin said, the most dangerous thing you can do is individualize yourself in this world and in this society. So I try to take all of those influences that I kind of come upon and put that into my work, so that way it is individualized.
Okay, so the question, the identity and culture thing, how do I say it? Like, because I grew up in the foster system, so it was like being Black really made it difficult because I never was like adopted out, and I felt like that was something. Sorry, it was something because the way I was made to feel. So I was ashamed of the Black part a lot. So when people say like, "Oh, what are you mixed with?" You always say that last part, Black, like kind of quiet, and hope that they don't hear it to judge you. So as I got older, and found myself, I don't know that side of my family really. They don't, like, they never bothered to be involved either, the Black side. So when I did try to reach out, I still felt rejected as an adult. So I just stopped altogether. But as I found myself, I'm not scared to say it. I don't let my kids feel bad. It was really hard. But so when I do my work now, I put all of that emotion that I've learned to process, and I try to filter it and clean it and make it good for everybody. Does that make sense? Dang, this is difficult because I don't talk with people or about this. So the identity is, the positive side was, at least I was raised in the Ikwa. So it kept me within my culture. So it always stayed the same. Like, no matter what house you lived in, there was the bird songs, there was the basketry you saw. There was always that consistency. So I definitely really appreciated that. I was like huge, because I think if I didn't have either, like I don't know where I would be, because who would you be, you know? So it's very important, and it's like a double-edged sword. You know, you're too dark to be native, too light to be black, and then you're like, where do you go? But then you just got to go in yourself and then figure it out. That's it. Sorry.
Thank you for sharing, Adeline. I appreciate that. Thankfully, we have ICWA, right? And how it's being challenged now is really important to stay close to what's happening with that. Well, I am, at least, for the decision that's coming up, I think in June. So identity and culture, man, that's always in flux for me. I know that my identity and culture were informed from my experiences growing up urban in Portland, but also being connected to home in rural Oregon. But I also think it's really important to self-determine ourselves outside of things that are expected of us, or especially blood quantum for me has been a thing that I've been really critical of and challenging it, because even though I participate in it, I'm really critical of it. So I just feel like, me as a mama, it's important to give my kids all of who they are at all times, if possible. And I've made it a point to do the work to know our family history and to divine culture for us as a family that's based on our blood ties, our community ties, our language, our territory, our water, our mountains. All of those things keep my culture and identity in flux, but also rooted at the same time. Like, I know where I'm from, and I'm grateful that my ancestors had done the work to survive, really, and to be in existence for us to be here. So, but even in like my shows, like sometimes how I title myself as an artist, it depends on the show and the thematic focus of the show and the museum or the gallery that it's in. But sometimes it'll be Natalie Ball Black, and that's it, or Natalie Ball Afro-Indigenous, or Natalie Ball just Modoc. Like, I play with these things specifically and pointedly in different spaces to hold complex through identity and through culture by claiming Blackness.
Wow. Thank you. That was beautiful and powerful. So thank you for sharing that, relatives. For myself, identity and culture are one of the same. And I say that because they both function interchangeably, right? In terms of, as a Diné Naahilii person, as a Diné person who was raised by my grandmother, was taught the life-sustaining methods and life ways of our people. And on the Naahilii side, there was that absence, but there was also still, a very strong presence in terms of my mom and her, her friends, or people that were a part of that very beautiful kinship process in terms of how they participated in my life and how I participated in theirs. And so I think, for both heritage, I see them both based on the foundation and the concept of k'e, which is kinship, and how with k'e is both the theory and philosophy of relationships between the human and the non-human, right? We have those relationships with, as Natalie had shared, with the land, not just through our clan systems, but with the land and our non-human relatives, and and the universe. So I think how we learn to evolve and function and begin to see ourselves, as a part of this beautiful process, and this beautiful word, this eloquent word is very, very important and encompasses so much. And my grandmother, her being a woman of kinship, always emphasized that to me in terms of who I am. She would always tell me, you need to always know who, know your clans and know who you are related to, and how you will then extend that kinship to, those around you. And so, she was very, just that powerful force, to remind me every day that despite what other individuals, within our family, our community, or even, out in just the Navajo Nation as a whole, how they perceived me and what they felt that I should be, whether it was, and I still get this today. I just recently got a comment on one of my posts basically telling me, you need to figure out who you want to be. You want to either be Black or you want to either be Navajo, like which one, choose, right? So putting this, basically that, putting me in a position where I have to choose who I am, but not understanding that this is just who I am. And, you just got to deal with it regardless. So, and it's not going to change, but my grandmother reminding me every time, all the time, to be proud of who I am, as a Diné Naahilii being, as a Diné Naahilii holy being, in this world. So I say, that with the identity and culture, for me having been brought up, by my grandmother, it's all one of the same. And so the way I view the world is in that, are through those lens, because of how I was raised, and, and how I'm raising my son to also be a person of kinship, in that way, to be a good relative, in that way. So, yeah.
Thank you all for sharing your experiences. I know that it's not always easy to do that, and I really appreciate that. You guys are sharing this with all of us. I'm going to ask the next question. I know it's going to be a difficult one. I'm going to condense that question with the next question. So it's going to be like a longer one. What were your experiences growing up as an Afro-Indigenous or Black Native individual, and what are those experiences like today, and how have those experiences, and how do they experience or influence your art?
Okay, I don't know how much time we have, but but for the first question, in terms of our experiences, my experience, I guess, personally growing up as a Black Native, I find them to be very similar. I actually host a podcast called Quantum Theory, where we interview Black Natives, and the answer is always the same. You're not Black enough for your Black side. You're not Native enough for your Native side. You're too light, just as Adeline said, you're too light for your Black side. You're too dark for your Native side. And so growing up, I definitely received those comments, the endless comments of basically portraying and, showcasing, basically validating what I just mentioned as just not being enough. And so growing up that, and even to this day, I still have moments where I feel that way, but I think it's a huge contributor of kind of that insecurity of just not being enough. And so I had that insecurity for, a long time. And the one thing though, even though, there are things that you're hearing, they you're still hearing them, but my family was definitely deep rooted in just knowing who I was. And so like my dad, he always made sure I knew who I was. He always made sure I knew my history. He always made sure I was reading different books about different people, watching documentaries that, this is who you are. This is where you come from. I grew up on the East Coast a good chunk of my life, and then came over to the res, and then was back and forth ever since. And then when I moved over to the res, language and culture and food and land, all of that stuff was taught to me by my family. And, you know, the language was definitely showcased to me from a young age, along with those practices. So my beadwork and things like that. Both sides of my family definitely deep rooted who I was and what that truly means to me. So a lot of the outside voices, a lot of the things growing up that I had to hear from kids and even elders, unfortunately, within my community, towards me, you you just kind of have to learn how to shake it off in a lot of different ways, because I knew who I was. I was probably more Native than them because I knew where I came from, and I knew my bloodline, I knew my language, and I was Blacker because, hey, I knew that, we went further back than slavery, you know what I mean? So I was very tapped in of who I was and where I came from. But the comments still kind of get to you, and that kind of strings on your insecurities from time to time. And so as I got older and as I grew up, that was just something that I kind of had to deal with. It wasn't until I kind of became kind of where I'm at now, I'm in the mental space that I am now, to realizing, what anybody has to say has everything to do with them and nothing to do with you. And I'm very careless in that way, and I kind of bring that into my work and the things that I choose to do within my community. And I try to kind of act through my actions, as opposed to, speaking about what's right and what's wrong. I try to be a role model in that way, to where, we are talking about different things. I curate these conversations within my community. I actually host a Juneteenth event every year on my res. And, we come together as Black Natives and we share our experiences, and it's raw. It's very real, because this is what we're experiencing in our community, and this is what's going on. It's not always negative. There's very beautiful parts, of course, of it as well. But just by being open and being honest and sharing my story and where I came from, once I kind of understood that, and that, my experiences matter, my voices matter, who I am matters, that is kind of how it has influenced beyond just beadwork, but it has influenced within my work as a whole, to just kind of have that attitude of doing you and doing things the way you want to do them. So just kind of growing up and having that whole experience of people wanting to tell me who I am and who I'm not, and then getting to this stage now. It's a beautiful journey now that I look back at it, but it's definitely a difficult one, because it doesn't always come, for the fact that it comes from, society alone, and then you have your community sometimes, and sometimes it's family, and it can be tough. But I think now I look back at it as, more of just kind of more so in terms of mental health, and maintaining that mental health and making sure that, just as generational wealth, we need generational health. And so if I can establish that and showcase that and be open and honest and create boundaries and do all these things that our people haven't been able to do, and I'm speaking to my own about it, that's what's important to me, to where I can pass that down to my kids and they can pass that down to their kids. And so it's just restructuring and unlearning a lot of things that we had to go through, so that way the next generation doesn't have to. And so when it comes to influencing my art specifically beadwork, I guess we can say, I guess within my art, I'm just still kind of learning. I'm still learning my language. I've learned quite a bit, but just to maintain it, just as every other, most tribes, not all tribes, our elders are passing away, and we're not hearing the language as much as we used to. And so by incorporating my language into my artwork, by naming them, Nimipu names, that's kind of how I continue my language. And it's more so helping me as well, and my peers seeing that language and making it more common. That's one way that I kind of transition that. But then also, like I said with the last question, is kind of understanding my Black side and my roots in that way. I want to dive even deeper till I found that I'm Nigerian, which is crazy, which is awesome. I took Ancestry and I was like, okay, I'm Nigerian, so now I'm wanting to dive deeper into that, to what tribe am I from, from Nigeria, and trying to kind of combine some of those designs together. I did a bag where I had African design on one side and a Nimipu woman on the other side. And so it's just this whole journey of me just figuring out where I'm coming from, having fun with it, and showing people that I'm proud of it. And then hopefully encouraging others to do the same, especially Black natives to do the same. But, just embracing some of the ugly parts of yourself and finding the beauty in them and kind of putting that into your work, and then also realizing, for me at least, realizing that inspires people. So that's the way I've just been kind of moving the last year and a half, is just being open with my journey, but also including it in my work so that others would have, be able to do the same with their creative art form as well.
Okay, so we all know the growing up part was kind of doo-doo at most times. I got a lot of racism mostly from my own family.
Hey, Adeline, I think your mic's turned off.
No, it says it's on. On? Yeah. Can you hear it now? Can you guys hear now? Yes? No? Can't hear me? Okay, so you guys can hear? Yeah, so I got a lot of the racism from my own family, like cousins and aunties, and I specifically remember when I heard the first N-word, and I was like, whoa, who's she talking to? You guys still can't hear me? I don't know what to do. Can you guys hear now? Nobody can hear anything? What is that? Audience can hear me? Okay.
I think we're just having a couple of can you hear?
I don't know. You guys can hear now. Okay, well, it was just
we can't hear, but the audience can, so
okay,
that's what matters.
It was like a you're just trying to figure out why bizarre, and then you catch on and you're like, oh, that kind of sucks, but whatever, so you get used to it, and you hear younger, your family would be yelling at the TV saying those words at the sports things, and you're like, oh, I mean, I know they can see me sitting here, but I mean, I guess it doesn't pertain to me. But really, they got better. Everybody got better, and they don't use it anymore. There's some people in our family that are like, oh, no, we're not racist. But then you hear the things and their actions, and they're like, okay. But as you grew up with it, I don't want to say you get used to it, but you just learn to adapt with it and just kind of roll with it. Because what are you going to do? You can't really go anywhere. And then, so I think it's my dog. Sorry. So I think it's just that the growing up that way was, it was just a piece of me. It was just an incident. They didn't define me or break me. So it was kind of it was a thing. It was fun, I guess. I don't know. But when I do my art now, it's just, I felt because you have to, when you do something and you're different, you have to do it better, or you want to be better. You have to prove yourself in whatever you're doing, because you've already been made to feel, like Mikailah said, not enough. There's never enough. You have to pull one side or the other side. So you always got to do everything harder. Or when you go up in school, or they say, if you're late, it looks bad on you. So you want to be early. You just got to always knock off the stereotypes, it feels like. And so when I do the work, it's become more of, like I said, a healing thing, because you process, and it's slow, and it's purposeful. So everything you do, you have to think. So when you sit in those thoughts and you're just beating the one beat and the tag, it's just you're able to process things, and it's pretty, I don't know, it's neat. When I do my portraits now, I've developed that by doing my research, asking people for their history, and if they've grown up on reses and stuff, you're able to more relate and understand. So I think it's able to put more into the portraits and the names. I don't know if that makes sense, but just think growing up to how I did, it just makes me want to do things better or more. I don't know how to say it, but then like I think it's really cool. Like Mikailah, like she said she knows she found her roots in Nigeria. Like that is wild. Like, where would it? Now I'm thinking like, how could I figure that out? It's pretty inspiring. I thank you for sharing that. It's pretty cool. And you guys is the language. I don't know, Radmilla and Mikailah. That is so awesome. Where we're from in SoCal, it's really starting to make a comeback. And I know I want to learn it, but I live in Nevada right now, so I haven't gone home yet for a while. I haven't been ready for that yet. But I think it's super awesome, and you guys are very inspiring. Thank you.
Sorry, Adeline, I couldn't hear you. I really wish I could read lips too. The question was, Mike, what was the question? It was about what it was like growing up.
Yeah, what your experiences growing up as an Afro-Indigenous or Black Native person were, what those experiences are now, if they're still like the same, and how these experiences influence your art.
Okay. Well, I fought a lot. Like honestly, in like both of these spaces, I was fighting probably until my 30s. But I learned other ways to handle aggression. It's just growing up with it. It's just what you did when you were confronted with violence. You fought back. Anti-Blackness is real in these spaces and in Indian country. But also like I had really beautiful experiences in Portland in the community we were in, because we were terminated as a tribe, and then we were coming together in the city, and then creating community and culture there, which was really, I think we need a documentary on that. But it was really special. It was a really special time. Even though like tactics of genocide were being enacted against us, I think that being within a Black community too, and like finding and learning what identity and belonging meant in those spaces, helped me not to take existing as an Indian in these Indian spaces so hard, because belonging is a lot different in my experience than it is in my Black community and my Black family. And I believe like because I'm Afro-Indigenous, because I'm Black and Indian, I had a hard time in Indian country in the art world coming up, even though a lot of experiences were great and I had a lot of support. The tone of it was a lot different maybe 10, 15 years ago. So I decided to pluck myself out, and I headed to Yale to figure out how to broaden my audience and kind of get out of the Indian art world, just to expand. You know, I wanted more for myself, and I wanted to be able to speak to the things that I wanted to speak about without being censored or isolated or ignored. But also humor is a big part of my practice. And I know that humor is a big part of both of my communities and my family. And I bring that into my studio practice. It informs my materiality. It informs the gestures that I'm making. It informs the sculptures that I'm making. But also, so do all of my experiences. So that's all filtered through my work, and hopefully like you can feel that humor through the work as well, because I know it's serious being in these spaces. It's hard at times, but also extremely beautiful, and so I try to bring that through the work, where I'm free to make the work that I want to make. I think that's it. Yeah, I just try to just, hold my composure when I'm faced with adversity because of who I am, and really teach and show my kids how to navigate it, but then also hold strong to knowing who they are and being really present in that identity.
Okay. Geez. experiences growing up as an Afro-Indigenous person today, or then back then and today. Oh man, I would say that as a Afro-Indigenous person, that my background was, as an Afro-Indigenous person, was a constant question, as it still is today. And beginning first, again, with my immediate family members, then relatives, extended relatives, communities, and how that extended out when I became Miss Navajo Nation, with the Navajo Nation as a whole. And, and being questioned on both, both heritages, on both, backgrounds of whether or not I was Navajo enough or Black enough. And how colorism played out through, on both sides, as well as the anti-Blackness and the anti-Indigeneity as well. So I was very fortunate to have individuals in my life that I was, aside from my grandmother who raised me and reminded me every day to be proud of who I am. Individuals in both communities to play, a positive role in also reminding me to be a proud Diné Naahilii person. And so, but yeah, it was very, I think growing up was tough. It was, I think, especially when you are dealing with anti-Blackness within your home first, having to hear your uncles calling you the Z word, as I refer to, which now today in my work, I've been in this movement for the past 15 years to replace that term, which over time has become a derogatory racist term from our language, which was the Nahilii, and is also used as what I refer to as the Z term, Jini. And so, so hearing it from, my uncles and kids, from my grandmother's home, and going to school and experiencing anti-Blackness at school, and then coming home back to it. I mean, it was just in my life everywhere. And so I always found refuge in the sheep corral with the sheep and the goats, because that's where music began for me, was where I was able to express myself and just be free, and just really be myself, without someone, constantly reminding me that I didn't belong, among them. And so, yeah, I think it's with the work that I do today, it is always, it's this constant place where I'm having to remind Diné people what are, in terms of what our philosophies are, in terms of what hajjon and beauty means, because we pride ourselves, in walking in beauty, but where's the beauty in anti-Blackness? Where's the beauty, in racism and in colorism? I mean, so just creating these spaces for a lot of our younger Diné Naahilii relatives to be seen and to be heard, and centering their voices, with what we did, like last year, myself and Shadeja, Diana Mitchell, and Shania, Darius Smith did a 4-part series panel discussion on navigating through our identity as Diné Naahilii relatives, and creating these spaces for even caregivers to share what it was like raising Diné Naahilii children, and then also hearing from a Diné practitioner who he himself shared the importance of the color Black within our culture, and how it's we have our Black deities, right? I mean, it was beautiful. It was very powerful, but it's important to carry that forward for our younger generation and to remind again our people, the NEP people, that, you know, we're not the enemy. we're and we're here to, you know, be a part. We're here and we're not going anywhere, and we're multiplying, and you know, we're very proud of who we are, and you know, and we just want to be respected and accepted, you know, and so so this new term that you know, that I've been educating our community on for the past 15 years has really elevated. And it's thanks to a lot of our younger generation, our younger Diné Naahilii relatives, and the, you know, the younger Diné relatives who have stepped up and said, you know, we want to support. How can we support? How can we be a part of this process? So it's a lot of, you know, there's a lot to a lot of work that, you know, that we are all doing to continue to feel a part of our communities, and a lot of resistance, you know, in the process of that. But, you know, it's something that we all are very passionate about, and we want to continue to move forward, and, you know, for the sake of our younger generation, and how they can be able to walk through their time and their life, you know, living a just, free, and dignified life, right? So, so yeah, so that's, I think for me, that's the connection, I think, with all of us here in terms of the anti-Blackness and colorism and what we have experienced, you know, from our youth to present day, and how we're, you know, moving forward, navigating forward with that, with our work and through our work.
Awesome. So our fifth panelist has just joined us. She was having some technical issues. I'm going to bring her up to the stage now. I'm going to give her the opportunity to introduce herself. Some of the topics that we've talked about have just, you know, it's been what your experiences have been as an Afro-Indigenous or Black Native individual and artist, and how they've influenced your art. If you want to introduce yourself and then just kind of briefly touch on that topic, that would be amazing. I think your mic is off. It looks like it switched back off. There you go.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Shanoa Williams. I currently live in Duluth, Minnesota right now. I kind of wrote some stuff down. So I go by Aonic on Instagram, and Beat Art by Shanoa on Facebook, which I'm still currently locked out of. I was born in Woodland, California, to Pam, who is Pyramid Lake Paiute, and Paul, who's African American. I was a third born. I'm a Gemini, and I grew up on the Pyramid Lake Paiute Reservation until about 18, where I left and went to IAI. I was there for about a year, then I dropped out. And Jen, what was the other part of the question?
What your experiences growing up as an Afro-Indigenous or Black Native individual were, and how those influence your art forms.
That's a tough question. So growing up on the res, I never really fit in. Me or my sisters, we were the only like Black and Indigenous kids there. Definitely experienced a lot of racism growing up. But as far as my art's concerned, I feel like I beat from a blood memory like perspective. Like I just have an idea for a design and I just go with it. whether it makes sense or not. I feel like it's coming from somewhere. And that's pretty much all. That's all I have.
Okay. So I'm gonna kind of delve away from the list for this next question. Just given where we are in terms of time, I've got 2 questions that I'm gonna ask, but one at a time. So the first one is there a singular event that has really affected or influenced you as an artist?
Like an in-person event that's affected us, or just like an experience, so to speak?
An experience.
Okay. I don't want to hold anybody up. Can I go? Can I go last? I feel like that's a broad question.
Yeah, I know. I feel like that one I just kind of sprung on you guys. So whoever, if you feel it,
pass, come back.
Yeah, that is a tough question. Visual.
Could you repeat the question again?
Is there an experience or an event that has happened in your career as an artist, or something that maybe led you to be an artist, that has really affected you?
I would say that I did not expect to be a Diné traditional singer. And because I grew up, right, idolizing Whitney Houston, and I think it was more along those lines of, I want to be like Whitney Houston. But it's interesting how when I think back on how my career started as a traditional Diné singer, it was the people that made that happen for me. I actually recorded after I had given up my title as Miss Navajo. I wanted to make an album to just say thank you, for your support to the Diné. And so I recorded the album, and after I recorded the album, I thought that was it, right? I'm just thank you, and that was it. And like when I was doing my little res tour, people were already asking me, when's your next album coming out? And I was like, no, this is the only one I'm doing. This is just to say thank you. And they're like, no, you need to do another one. I was like, I do? Yes, you do. And so every single album that came out from that point on, it was always, when's your next album coming out? When's your next album coming out? When's your next album? So that's just kind of how it happened for me as a singer. And so I really didn't plan on singing traditional Navajo songs. And so it was the blessings of the people that Andy and Diné are only ones that, that made it happen for me. And so, yeah, that's kind of how my career started as a singer. So, yeah.
You have to give the people what they want.
And I'll just say, like, this isn't a mandatory question. I just thought it would be like interesting to see if there had been anything that like just really spoke to you as an artist, because I know someone asked me that question. I can't really say that there were like there for me, like there had been a singular event. That really, so I know it's a left field question. But since we are at the end of our hour, I'm going to go into our last question. And let me look at the way that I worded it and make sure that I still like it. So the last question is, from your perspective and in your opinions, in what ways do you think that tribal communities can do better and can begin to dismantle anti-Blackness within themselves?
So for tribal communities specifically, yeah, tribal communities, I think when it comes to anti-Blackness, it's just kind of not being, at least within my community, I don't want to speak for anybody else's community, but within my community can be very supportive. Obviously, just as any other community, there are some that are not so supportive, but it's really just kind of focusing in on those that do have your support. So for example, I didn't really kind of take this leap into actually moving forward with just my work and my art and everything, just really embracing it and moving forward with it. I think once the Black Lives Matter movement came around, I was called upon to speak for a protest they were doing. And I never seen myself as a speaker, but I'm like, I don't want anybody speaking about Black experiences who aren't Black, so I'll go ahead and find something to say. So I spoke, and it had a great reaction. And just like Natalie, it's like you get angry, you want to fight. You come from two deeply rooted cultures, as I mentioned, to where colonization has infested us, to where we have a right to be angry because a lot of these things that are going on, that have went on are still going on. And so, and I'm not my ancestors, you'll catch these hands. So, your instinct is you want to be angry. And I think once the Black Lives Matter movement came along, it was like, man, I'm mad. Oh, don't mind Google. You can now relax. So my instinct is, okay, I'm angry, I'm mad, I want my land back, I want, my 40 acres and my mule. But it was just like, there's no reason to, I'm putting my energy towards the wrong group of people. Racism isn't going anywhere anytime soon. You know what I'm saying? Unfortunately. So it's like, after I realized to switch my energy from being mad at, a certain group of people to putting that same effort and that same energy into showing my people what we're capable of showing my people, okay, we need resources. How do we get them together? Just totally switching my focus into my community and figuring out how we can kind of come together. And when it comes to anti-Blackness, it's the same thing. It's just jumping into the community and, sometimes biting the bullet for the younger generation. I say that all the time I've spoke to Black Native kids in high schools, and I'll say, I'll bite that bullet for you, but I need to know what you're going through. So therefore we can create a platform. When I have that platform, I'm going to showcase, I'm going to, bring awareness to, the things that we go through. And so in that way, I think that's kind of the best way to do it, is just being able to be open to those who have different experiences than you, especially us, and listen, we're not that much different when it comes to, to both sides and to both ethnicities and cultures. We're not that different. We've experienced a lot of things. Even though your land was taken from you, this country was built on our backs. Like, we still have that same unfortunate struggle with colonization and unpacking a lot of the things that we're, the reparations we're still trying to achieve. And so I think, just when it comes to kind of being more supportive within your communities, I think the best thing anyone could do is really just listen and to show up when we do have, things like this, and show up to, anything, and support things that we have going on, and being open to a new perspective. Because a lot of people don't realize, and should realize, is especially the Native community, but of this country, of course, Black culture is heavily influenced in everything that we do. And so kind of understanding where that comes from and where it derives from, I think just, brings a lot more knowledge into those communities. And of course, understanding. I've experienced a lot of stereotypes, within Native communities, or slang words, or, just things that aren't okay. So I think by us speaking up and our community showing up to listen, I think that goes a long way.
Saying correct in a lot of those things as well. I think, yeah, it just comes down to basically not being a jerk. Like, don't be an a-hole. Colorism is brought in by Europeans. You know, they made you think that, oh, you know, their pale skin is better than everything when it's really not. They're allergic to the sun, so it's not okay for them. But so like our people were all kissed by the sun, no matter where you come from. You know, if you look at our ancestors' pictures, they're all dark skinned. The black side, native side, they're all dark skinned. And like I think they need to go back and remember that your ancestors were also dark too, even if you didn't come from the black side. So your colorism is purely brought from the European views, and it's disrespectful to your ancestors as well as to the people around you. And you should really, I think what would help is if the community start embracing them more. Not saying like special attention, but instead of like having more inclusivity. Like this panel today, if they did more things like that on their own reses where they had more open discussion. And I think that would go a long way. And people can understand and try to, relate or find what they could do to make a difference. Like, I think there's just more reaching out inclusivity. And the colorism is got to stop.
I just think that knowing what anti-blackness is really important, like what that looks like and what that sounds like. And I think it's really important for me to, I guess, do that labor and do that work in these communities where it happens. So I think defining what that is and just holding space, like when I don't know what to do, like how my practice kind of unfolded in the church is like I wasn't seeing in collections that were specific for Indian art or Native American contemporary art, I wasn't seeing myself in that collection or reflected back. Like I wasn't seeing myself and I wasn't seeing my kids. So I was like, it would be nice if I was also in these collections or was included and held that space again for what Indian is in the country and in the world. So making it more complex and offering it, chopping it up a bit, adding like this swag to it that can help you further understand who we are as a nation, but also who I am. And I felt like I felt like I deserved that space. I felt like we deserve that space to exist in these really Indian heavy spaces where often our blackness isn't included or it's excluded intentionally. So yeah, I just feel like defining what anti-blackness is and what that looks like and how that has looked like historically is really important in these spaces for me. Yeah.
I think knowing, as well, I mean, we know, but there's a lot of people who still don't know that first and foremost, that anti-blackness is a tool of colonization, and to ask, or to ask yourselves, how can I be a better relative, right, to our Naahilii relatives, to our Black relatives, and vice versa? How can I be a better relative to, our Indigenous relatives? And what does Indigenous, Black and Indigenous liberation look like? I think, colonization has disrupted a long intertwined history, with our Naahilii relatives, our Black relatives, and, who they too are Indigenous. And I think also a lot of folks don't realize and understand that our Naahilii relatives are not settlers, that they are displaced Indigenous peoples themselves. And so that solidarity, as we know, predates the so-called US. And so what does it mean, right, in terms of what what it means to be a good relative. How can we put that in action, in place, be proactive in centering our Naahilii relatives' voices, or our Indigenous Diné Naahilii relatives, or Tla'a'schi'i Afro-Indigenous relatives' voices and lived experiences. And so, we're doing it right now, here, by actively participating, in groups like this. Also reaching out, to a lot of our Afro-Indigenous relatives and having them do presentations, on their lived experiences and centering their voices, calling out anti-Blackness, colorism, and emphasizing the importance of kinship, within our communities, and supporting, our Afro-Indigenous relatives and their businesses. Now, I want to see Mikailah's beaded earrings now, and so just like this is a whole introduction to a lot of our Afro-Indigenous relatives and the businesses and the art, that we should be supporting as well. So I think here on the Netra, or just even in general, right, as I had mentioned early on, the Nahilii term, the Black term, that is replacing the Z term, the derogatory racist term, we are constantly encouraging our people and our relatives here to use the Nahilii term. And it's been great because, like I mentioned early on, there's been organizations and a lot of our people who have stepped up and applied it, even to, as I'm wearing a shirt here, to Black Lives Matter, right? Using the language, Naahilii beda'ina nihil tanele, right? And how even that in itself is being proactive in elevating the Naahilii term here at home, but strengthening those kinships, and that will lead us on this path of solidarity. Will lead us on this path of liberation, so that we can all live a just, free, and dignified life together on our terms. And that's just, and so I think we always talk about how through kinship we're strong, and this is a part of that process and what we strive for, every day, and in terms of being a good relative. So these are just some thoughts that we, that would, some ways to be more proactive with, within our communities, and applying a lot of this even to ourselves, in terms of what it means to be good relatives to one another and to each other, and to the land, and to our non-human relatives, because it's all interconnected. It all intersects. So, yeah. So I'm very honored to be here today with all of you, each and every one of you, and hearing your stories and making those connections, those beautiful, strong connections. And so again, thank you for having me and hearing your beautiful stories and experiences. So, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So this is kind of got me thinking. Like, everybody had really good points, and before Instagram, I actually thought I didn't know there were other Afro-Indigenous beadworkers, because I was the only one that I knew of before social media. So just being here with you all is pretty incredible. This is a really tough question, but it does really go back to colonialism, colorism, which is a problem in both Indigenous and African American communities. And I think a lot of it, hold on, give me a second. A lot of it has to do with language. Like, growing up, you hear people say, "Oh, don't go out into the sun because you're going to get too black," and it's just there were so many negative ideas, like some of the people on the res I'm from had about, our brown skin. And I think just loving, like Adeline said, just loving the fact that our skin's sun-kissed, and it goes for Indigenous and African American. Self-love, I think, is what it's going to take. But yeah, this is just a really tough question to answer. I think everybody pretty much touched on it already and made some really valid points.
Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today, especially our panelists. I hope that our audience had some moments of reflection and I don't know how to verbalize what I'm trying to say, because I know there were some really profound things that you guys said during this panel that have caused me to, sit back and think about what I can do in terms of developing programming at the museum and do better myself. But I want to thank everyone for joining us today. If the speakers could just sit with me for a second, I'm going to end the session. It's just going to throw us backstage. I look forward to seeing our audience at our next virtual panel. We will be having one per month.